And welcome home. This is Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Actually, can't wait to cover this. We've sort of like shredded the outline that I was given and reworked the whole thing, but that's not uncommon here in the Tampa Home Talk studio. And today I want to welcome our guest for the show, Mr. Ken Bronlick. He is with Groundworks. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So glad you're here. He is a United States veteran for the Marine Corps.
Yes, ma'am.
So lovely little background here. I was reading up on you and really honored to have you. Smart little cookie. You've got a patent as it relates to seawall stabilization, which we're going to talk about today.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're going to also talk about the FEMA 50 rule for some of our folks here in the area in Tampa Bay that got flooded after the storms of 2024. And they have to actually raise their structure. And then I'm sure we'll touch a little bit on stabilization. So if there's any type of ground soil movement, cracking, sinkhole-ish, anything like that, we can talk about that too, because your company does that as well.
Absolutely.
Among other things, but that'll be plenty, I think, for 1 hour, or a little less than an hour. But so let's jump in and talk about the seawall stabilization first. If you want to talk and give a little bit of information about Groundworks and yourself, by all means, jump on in and tell the person listening a little bit about you.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you again for having me today. It's great to be here. About Groundworks, Groundworks is an organization that is nationwide. We have over 80 locations throughout the United States, and we are the largest provider of foundation stabilization methodologies and technologies, and also very important water and soil management. Nobody does more of that kind of work than we do. And we have a very large team of engineers at our disposal, both structural and geotechnical engineers, and we're able to provide the cutting-edge, latest, greatest technologies and solutions that are very cost-effective for everybody from homeowners all the way up to commercial and industrial, properties.
Now, Ken, when you say water and soil management, say more about that. Like specifically, what would someone hire your company for as it relates to that?
That's a great question. There are so many various different things that come up when it comes to structural instability, sometimes structural failure, and a lot of times it has to do just with the soil conditions. There's various different dynamics that come up with the geotechnical realm of subsurface soil conditions, including voids, decomposing organics, and all these various different things that cause a structure to fail. However, water and water mechanics also plays a very large role in that.
Yes.
So depending on what has taken place in a very individual circumstance with a property or preparation for a property, it will call for various different techniques and technologies in order to provide the right solution. And I think that's what we are the very best at.
So give me an idea of your seawall stabilization. I'd love to chat about that a little bit more. You said you have a patent that you've developed, so I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. Like, what's the traditional method in terms of seawall stabilization, repair, replace, whatever? And then tell me about your technology and how it's different and how that helps homeowners.
Absolutely. Well, the patent is U.S. patent number 12084825.
I'm so impressed with that. Look at that.
And your question is spot on because the patent came out about as a result of failed attempts to prevent premature failure of a seawall. And what I mean by that is when we go back 10, 15, even 20 years ago, most people were pumping all kinds of various different heavy materials behind a seawall to try to keep it stabilized. And when I say try to keep it stabilized, we're talking about preventing premature failure. And when you pour a lot of hydraulic cement, slurry, other materials that typically weigh about 150 pounds per cubic foot, you're adding a lot of stress to that structure. And I don't want to get overly technical right now with all that, but when you do that, it's actually making the problem worse. So what myself and another gentleman did is we started to utilize a single component polyurethane resin to fill in the voids behind the wall, restore the backfill zone, the active wedge behind a seawall on the landward side, reestablish shear strength of the backfill zone that provides the kind of stability that the seawall needs. Now, if that were the only thing that we did, we would have failed. But what we did was we incorporated a dewatering system utilizing the permeated soil with the single component polyurethane resin. And we established a system of dewatering channels with a panel filter called the jet filter, and that allows equilibrium of hydrostatic pressure on both sides of the structure. And I realize that may sound kind of technical.
I was going to say, yeah, can you break that down a little bit more for the layperson? Because that, like,
Absolutely.
for example, even when I hear you say polyurethane resin, I'm thinking, like, is that on the order of a plastic?
It is it does fall into that realm. It's absolutely a polymer.
But it's lighter than concrete, essentially, is what you're saying.
Significantly.
Okay.
Significantly lighter. So it doesn't
So
sink.
not to dumb it down, but like literally explain it to me like I'm a kid. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because in your world, that's easy and you run through it. You do it all the time. But most people are like, what in the heck are you talking about? Like they're looking at the basic stuff, like their seawall's falling into the water and they just need to know how to fix it. Right? So
absolutely.
I'd love for you to come at it from that angle because I think people appreciate that.
Absolutely. So when we talk about heavy materials being put in behind a seawall,
You're talking about like the rebar, the reinforcement, that
I'm
kind
talking
of
about
stuff?
like concrete,
Okay.
yeah, slurry, hydraulic cement. That was the go-to methodology for decades. When a seawall started to have voids and destabilization started to occur. And a lot of people don't realize, but these seawalls were originally designed to last a lot longer than what they're lasting.
Say more about that. So they were designed to last for how long, and what are you seeing?
Sure. When you go back to the various different studies that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had performed on seawalls, their structure and design from an engineer's perspective, and actual tests that they did, like on Balboa Island here in the state of Florida, they were anticipated to last 75 to 100 years. And in fact, I can take you to seawalls right now that have been around for 75, 80, 85 years, and they're still going strong. The big difference is the form of filter fabric that they started to put in behind the seawall. They used to put in a very durable, needle pin unwoven geotextile filter fabric that would allow water to pass back and forth without allowing soil to migrate from the land side into the waterway. But what we're seeing nowadays is more of a cheap woven plastic, kind of like silt that you would see at a construction site. And that material breaks down. And when that material breaks down and it's not there anymore to prevent soil from leaving the land side to the waterward side of a structure, that's when your voids form. And when you have voids behind a seawall, you have problems because it becomes destabilized. A very easy way to think about that is if I'm standing here in the middle of the room and you come up and you push me on the shoulders, I'm going to rock back on my heels because I don't have any support behind me. But if I'm standing against this wall right here and my shoulders are firmly against the wall, you apply the same amount of pressure to my shoulders, I don't have anywhere to go.
Right.
And that is why the backfill zone for the seawall, a bulkhead or revetment, is so very much important because these structures are constantly under pressure from the waterward side.
And are you saying that's how they used to build them, and they're not how
they used to build them was that first key component behind the structure that I'm making reference to, and that's that filter fabric. The filter fabric that they used to install, which is very expensive, was far higher in quality, and it would last and survive the elements, the chloride contamination from salt water, organic attack, and that sort of thing from fungus and bacteria and all these various different things. But the materials that we see nowadays aren't nearly as durable, and they're not lasting nearly as long. In fact, the original specifications, when we go back to the 1998 U.S. Army Corps of Engineers design of seawalls, bulkheads, and revetments, called for the entire landward side of the structure to be draped with this kind of material. But when we go to construction sites nowadays, we see that they're just putting them in with wood furring strips behind the joints. In other words, they're not actually canvassing the entire structure. So when we see that, and we know that a seawall is starting to get voids after 5 years and 10 years and so forth and so on, and it's becoming destabilized in a short period of time, we know that things have changed, and that it was observing all this that caused us to begin to look at other alternatives besides pouring heavy cement in behind the seawall to provide a mechanism to stabilize these structures. And very important to that, though, was not just dumping material behind the wall, but also incorporating a specific kind of single component polyurethane resin that would both permeate the soil, that would trap it and not sink, but allow us to incorporate a dewatering channel through the wall into the permeated soil.
Just describe that. You said that a couple times, the dewatering channel. What is that? If you were to describe that verbally, what does that look like?
What it is it's a round hole. And when a seawall is installed originally, there's a lot of engineering that goes into it. And what they're targeting, utilizing NOAA data, is the mean water line mark of a seawall. In other words, where is the water usually the majority of the time throughout the year? And they will put in what is referred to as a weep hole through the wall, but still have it covered with that filter fabric on the landward side to prevent soil from washing out and voids forming. And that is typically where that weep hole is. Now, when we talk about a dewatering channel, to answer your question specifically, after we do our resin injection, we come in with a hydraulic core drill and we clean out that weep hole that is already at the mean water line mark, which is where it should be. And we take that channel with extended core drill bits, and we go through the permeated soil that we created into the fresh soil. And then on the front of the seawall, on the waterward side, we install a jet filter. And a jet filter is a very special piece of equipment that was created by David Gentry from the Jet Filter Corporation. It's a magnificent invention that he created, but it allows water to pass back and forth once again, but it doesn't let soil come through the filter, and it doesn't clog. And that's really their claim to fame. It's an absolutely tremendous breakthrough for waterfront land retention systems.
Are there times when you go in and you're inspecting or looking at a seawall, are there times where you're like, I don't think we can repair this. We have to replace the whole thing?
Absolutely.
Is it where it gets to a certain point, or do you think it's how it was built, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, every contractor that I have trained across the United States and even down into Australia and New Zealand, we've always required an honest assessment. And the honest assessment is based on very harsh, very strict rules from the Army Corps of Engineers and other government agencies. The experts, so to speak, that actually design these structures. So our assessments are based on a criteria. So in other words, if I go to look at a seawall and it is clearly failed, we won't work on that wall unless it is expressly referenced in the contract for that customer that this is a failed seawall, and the only reason we are working on this wall is to buy you time. And that is another whole other realm of considerations. We have saved many properties, many homes, by working on a failed seawall that is going to fail by shoring up that soil with the soil injections and helping buy the customer time to get their new seawall installed. And that's been a large problem here in the state of Florida, especially after Hurricane Ian. A lot of homes weren't able to get their seawalls installed for a year, 18 months, 24 months, and at the same time they were losing their property. So when we come in and we do that soil injection with that single component polyurethane resin, we're solidifying all that soil where it meets the water, and that buys the customer a lot of time.
Are those like pylons almost, or what does that look like?
Well, when we do a soil injection, if you think about just a handful of round sand, and you typically have sandy soils right behind a seawall, a bulkhead, or revetment. When we shoot it with single component polyurethane resin, I should say inject it, it acts as a binding agent, just like cement inside of concrete. And it binds all the particles together. And we can actually achieve upwards of 1,500 PSI soil after we inject it with this polyurethane resin. And the resin is able to permeate into the soil, and it chases after the moisture content in the soil. And again, just like a binding agent, like cement, it binds it all together and creates essentially soil concrete.
Now, is this a temporary fix, or it's sometimes how you build new seawalls, or?
Well, again, there's really three areas, and you just touched on a very important one. When you look at our patent, you'll see that it's expressly oriented towards resiliency of seawalls. And by doing away with the filter fabrics and installing it behind a seawall at the time of new construction, that the single component polyurethane resin from various different TAC studies, TACS, show a service life post-soil injection of over 300 years.
Wow.
As opposed to just several years with some of the filter fabrics that we're seeing nowadays. So we're talking about a permanent solution. If the Army Corps of Engineers says that a seawall should last 75 to 100 years, and we're providing a soil management system and hydrostatic pressure system from the very outset of new construction, then yeah, absolutely, we're providing a permanent solution.
Yeah.
When we talk about repairing a seawall, we're talking about significantly extending its service life. So if a seawall is 30, 40, 50 years of age, and we start to see all these large holes behind it, we start to see that it's starting to tip over or even kick out at the bottom, then we know that our system can be utilized to stabilize that structure. So that's kind of the middle range of work that we do on a seawall. And then we have the emergency situations where somebody has a failed seawall and they need to have the soil shored up, and they need an immediate solution so the waterway doesn't completely destroy their property. We can come in and do 100 linear feet of waterfront property in less than a day. And so we can provide immediate relief and security for that property.
How expensive is something like that? Because, I mean, that's obviously urgent.
We're always going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80% less than the cost of a replacement seawall.
Okay.
So it's significantly less. I'm not going to say that it's cheap,
Right.
but it's far, far less than.
Well, seawalls are not. They're not cheap.
Yeah.
What is it? What is a repair like? I mean, I know that's such a vague question, depending on what you're looking at when you get out there and examine the seawall. But what does it cost to repair a seawall? Like, even if it's a range compared to putting in a brand new one, or if you have to replace it.
If all we're doing is our single component polyurethane resin injection, along with the dewatering channels and the jet filters, typically, the range for 100 linear feet of seawall is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $18,000, somewhere in that range, and it just kind of depends. Every seawall presents unique challenges,
Right.
And that kind of lends itself towards a quick discussion on another aspect of seawall repair that we specialize in, and that's the use of a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers tested technology for concrete repair, and specifically referring to an actual Unified Facility Guide specification that the Army Corps signed off on in 2019, I believe. And it's a migratory surface applied corrosion inhibitor system that penetrates deep into the concrete. It can be sprayed on or rolled on, and it's transported, the technology is transported by water as a medium, so it's not caustic or poisonous or anything like that for the environment. And what it does is really two important things. It penetrates deep into the concrete, and it creates a passivating layer on the steel reinforcement. It shuts down corrosion. And the Army Corps of Engineers tested and proved that this system works through long-term testing. Initially, it was like a 10-year test. Then they had like a 20-year test. And the other thing that it does is it utilizes free calcium inside the concrete matrix, and it super strengthens the concrete. What they found in Okinawa, Japan, is that the concrete after 10 years was actually stronger, both its compression strength, cylindrical strength, and tensile strength. It was stronger than what it was when it was originally poured about 30 years prior to that.
And so what does something like that cost?
It's very, very cost effective, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 per square foot.
Okay. Yeah. So like with anything, it depends on how big your seawall is. If it's tiny, it's going to be cheaper than someone that has a lot of waterfront property.
And for seawall repair, we're typically really focused on the seawall cap. When you drive around town, if you go down by the beach or canals, you'll see a lot of seawalls where you see this long horizontal crack in the cap. Maybe some of the concrete has fallen off into the canal. And you'll see all the rust, all that red-brown rust. And that is exactly what we're preventing with that particular technology, because the cap is so fundamentally important to the overall structure. It's holding all those panels together, and it needs to be kept strong. And that's exactly what this technology does.
What does a seawall cost? Like if someone's putting in a brand new one or replacing it, those can be crazy expensive, right?
Incredibly expensive. Yeah, 100 linear feet of wall, depending on the contractor that you're working with in the region that you're in. I've seen some recent ones that were being sold for upwards of $90,000 to $100,000.
Yeah, I was going to say it can't be cheap. It's a seawall.
It's exactly right.
So your technology that you patent, like how is that different? What was the what did that bring to seawall repair that wasn't there before?
Well, what it does is first and foremost, it's just effective. Not to get too technical, but our system reestablishes friction resistance of the backfill in relationship to the seawall itself, and also the shear strength of the soil in the backfill zone. And that kind of gets back into that whole thing about how important the backfill zone is to a seawall and the maintenance of its stabilization. Prior to that, even right here in Southwest Florida, what we saw most contractors doing, a lot of times even specified by engineers, because that's really all they had, was just efforts to fill those holes. and it was typically done with hydraulic cement or slurry, which is just wet cement that is able to fill those holes. And it was well intentioned. The thought is by putting a very firm material behind the wall that would help. But the problem is that material is incredibly heavy and it sinks. So if you pour a bunch of heavy material into soil that's already filled, a soil zone that's already filled, it's not going to be able to support the weight of that material. And it's also kind of like trying to fill when you try to fill a hole behind a seawall, it's kind of, with cement or other cementitious materials, it's kind of like trying to fill a mixing bowl with a straw. It just doesn't work very well. The single component polyurethane resin that we work with has an amazing ability to fill open space voids behind a seawall with the deep injections with a simple injection rod. And it's able to fill an open space without pushing against the wall upwards of 40 to 50 times its unit size. So once it's activated, if you think about holding a jug, 1 gallon of milk or water, and you think about 40 to 50 times the size of that unit size, that is what we're able to achieve with this technology, with the single component polyurethane resin.
It sounds fascinating. I love how the engineer brains can come up with something new that lasts a lot longer, just, better stuff over time. It's interesting how I feel like a lot of stuff was built really well and then the quality went down and now there's like new stuff that's making it better. So kind of with everything.
I think it's like that with pretty much everything. And a lot of it has to do with how expensive things get.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about that filter fabric that was originally called for to be draped behind the entire seawall on the land side before they would, drive down the panels. That stuff is expensive.
Yeah.
It's incredibly expensive. And so, people react by trying to come up with something that still works. And then you start to get away from the original engineered design.
Right.
And then that's where we see our problems.
That makes sense. So who does the inspections on this work? Like when you guys are done, is it the Army Corps of Engineers? Is it the EPA? Like who does the actual inspections on the work?
All of our including myself, we're all certified, assessors, so to speak, to be able to do a site assessment and be able to identify a problem, that a seawall is having. And I've created, for Groundworks and Alpha Foundations here in the state of Florida, a various different set of criteria for the assessment. So they all have the pre-printed assessment forms, and they're able to go down and identify any modes of failure, and we line up those modes of failure with the appropriate remediation.
Okay. So that, like, for example, if you're going to make a repair on a seawall, you need a permit for that, right? Like with the municipalities?
In some cases, one technology we haven't talked about yet is in the course of doing an assessment, if we see that a wall is beginning to tip over, in other words, the top of the seawall, its cap is starting to move in the direction of the seawall, there are parameters where we can still lock that in place, even according to the Army Corps of Engineers' own assessment criteria. And we don't ever ignore the fact that these seawalls have anchor systems, typically called the dead bend anchor system. If we have pretty good evidence that the anchor system is failed, we're not going to take any chances. We're going to recommend that the customer have us install what's referred to as a helical tieback. And a helical tieback is nothing more than a steel pier with a helical structure that is welded to the lead flight, the first pile that is installed. And we drive that into the backfill zone at about a 30-degree angle downward. And we're able to utilize some other structural elements to create a direct link to the front of the seawall. And we're able to lock it in place so it doesn't continue to tip over. Now, when we do that, that doesn't provide any soil management and hydrostatic pressure control. So we still revert back to the patented process with the single component polyurethane resin, the dewatering channels, and the jet filters. And we're able to provide still a very cost-effective solution to keeping that structure in place and preventing the failure of it.
We're seeing a lot of people not care for like regular homeowner maintenance items just because the cost of everything has gotten so expensive. So I would love it if you could just touch on really quickly before we move on, if someone has a seawall of some sort, especially saltwater, right, or brackish, which is pretty hard on anything, what happens over time? Like what is someone looking at if they ignore problems with the seawall?
Well, that's another fantastic question. We always talk about proactive maintenance and how much money at the end of the day we can save by being proactive with our maintenance. The big thing that we can do to help property owners with the seawall problem, when it starts to show various different signs of distress, whether it's void formation behind the wall, is first helping them and educating them to understand that when they start to see minor depressions behind the seawall, it's kind of like what you're really kind of seeing is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the void that's forming. Most of the soil is lost down towards what is referred to by the engineers as the mud line. And the mud line is the soil that your feet would come into contact with if you were to jump off of your seawall and go straight down in front of your seawall in the canal or the waterway or wherever you are. And it's down there where most of the soil is leaving from behind the seawall, from the land side to the waterward side. So by the time you start to see depressions up towards the sod layer or the surface, or if you start to see pavers that are starting to settle, what you're really seeing there is that tip of the iceberg. So there's a larger hole down deeper below. And identifying that is very important because all it takes is a really good storm. I don't know how many seawalls that we saw that failed after Hurricane Ian all up and down the southwest here. But those were undoubtedly seawalls that had major voids behind them that just weren't detected.
What did you see like after the storm came through and then you guys are there? What are you looking at?
Well, yeah, we're looking for ways that we can help people understand what they're seeing in their backyard or in the
But I'm saying, like, what was it? Was it like the void is completely gone and now it's open? Did the seawall actually break away in some cases? Like, what kind of stuff did you see?
Oh yeah, absolutely. After the storms went through, I'm sorry. Yeah, there were a lot of huge holes. Sometimes major holes behind seawalls after they failed. So when a seawall falls forward, as an example, or even kicks out, what it does is it pulls all that topsoil that's still there that was kind of hiding the voids that were behind the wall, and it opens it all up so you can kind of see what took place there. And that's where you have to be kind of careful about your perceptions on what you're seeing, because a lot of people think, well, the water came in and pulled out all that soil. But when you see a major hole after a seawall failure behind a wall, and it goes back 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet, what you're actually saying is the voids that were there before the seawall failed.
So what are some signs that people should be watching out for if they have a seawall that there could be a problem? So some of those are the dips or the depression on the other side of the seawall, on the inside.
If they have grass or sod behind their seawall, they should definitely be cognizant of any standing water or grass is starting to look like it's turning yellow because the roots aren't getting nourishment due to the lack of soil beneath it. Some of the larger signs that we see are concrete walkways or captain's walks behind a seawall that start to sink and get cracks and that sort of thing. That's telling you that there's voids underneath there. When you have pavers that are starting to sink, we have a lot of seawalls out there with pavers behind them. Well, those are all indications that voids have formed and something needs to be done about it right away.
Is there anything you would notice on the water side of the seawall that would be worth paying attention to?
Absolutely. A couple of things that property owners should very much pay attention to with their seawalls is barnacle growth. A lot of times they'll grow right along that mean waterline mark, and it's typically the line on which the weep holes that the Army Corps or the engineer for the actual design of that particular structure had the weep holes installed for the dewatering of the hydrostatic pressure. And when barnacles grow into those weep holes, and they do a lot, it's clogging and it's preventing water from being able to pass from the landward side to the waterward side. And that's going to cause an unequal balance of hydrostatic pressure. That puts a lot of stress on the seawall itself.
So the barnacles are bad.
Barnacles are bad. Want to get rid of those. And if you start to look down and you start to see behind on the waterward side at the mud line, it usually requires a nice sunny day to be able to see it. But if you start to see piles of soil at the bottom where the seawall joints come together, those vertical joints, that's another clear indication that your seawall has given up soil. And again, it may not be detectable, but that's definitely something that you should be on the lookout for. A very obvious one, but a lot of people have kind of written it off as just regular concrete cracks in the cap. When you walk your seawall, and you start to see these perpendicular cracks across the very top of the seawall that just so happen to kind of line up with those vertical panel joints for the seawall itself. What that's telling you is, and it took me a while to figure this out, but what that's telling you is that voids have formed behind the wall, down deep below, even though you can't see them yet. And the walls become destabilized. And what's happening is that those seawall panels are beginning to move out of tolerance. They're designed to move a little bit. When they start to move a lot, that's putting a lot of exertion on the cap that's trying to hold all those panels in place. And when that happens, you're well on your way to having some significant problems with your seawall.
Yeah, those are really good tips for homeowners to keep an eye out on, if they have a seawall. So let's chat about the whole FEMA 50 rule and the raising of the structures, because you guys do that as well, right?
We are. Groundworks and Alpha right here in the state of Florida is the largest installer of helical and push piers for structural reinforcement. And when a structure has begun to settle and sink due to soil conditions, we are able to drive those piers, those steel piers, down to low-bearing strata or even bedrock. And we're able to use hydraulics, and we're able to provide reverse loading underneath the structure, and we're able to get recovery.
To stabilize the foundation. Now, what about for the ones like the people that have been flooded and they're required to either tear their house down or raise it? You're doing that as well?
Well, we don't do the teardowns.
But I mean, the raising you do, right, of the structures?
We won't raise them above the original installed position. If they're requiring a structure to be elevated above
A certain height, yeah.
the certain height from where it was before, that is not something that we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've often wondered about that, because I know there's companies out there that are doing them, but I'm certainly not an engineer, but I'm thinking about the foundation, right? That this original footer was poured on, and then raising that structure in the air. I just can't imagine from an engineering perspective they would like that.
Yeah, it's that's a whole different ball game, and it's typically associated with contractors that do a lot of work with mobile homes and these other kinds of structures that are relocatable and that sort of thing. That's typically where you'll see a contractor doing that kind of work. But when it comes to what we do with helical piers and push piers, our goal is to make our effort to, first and foremost, prevent that structure from continuing to settle downward and having more structural damage. We are able to use the hydraulics to get recovery, but that is our specialty.
Yeah, it's I had a really great engineer explain it to me when I was asking about, the pylons and how they build on them or reinforce it. And the analogy that she gave me was, just imagine a table in the ground. So that slab or footer that your house is built on, when they do the pylons, it's like a stabilization. It's the legs for the foundation.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was an excellent analogy. I hadn't heard that one before, and I was like, that's a pretty simple way to think about it.
Yeah, it just transfers all the load down to a competent strata layer. When we talk about competent, we're talking about load-bearing strata layer. Yeah.
What type of stabilization techniques do you guys use? Like when you're seeing either cracks in the structure, it's not always sinkhole related, right? It could be just some type of void underneath. I mean, let's face it, Florida's built on Swiss cheese.
That's exactly
and
right.
There's different things that go into our geotechnical layers, like even the water. Too much water, not enough water. All those things can create issues with the structure of the homes in Florida.
There's so many different things that come into play with a destabilized structure. And you're absolutely right. It always comes back to the soil. Use the term Swiss cheese. I like that. I have discussed the Swiss cheese effect. The engineers, geotechnical engineers out there refer to it as a karst soil region. And it's kind of interesting. We've had projects where we're driving down helical piers and we'll hit competent low-bearing strata a lot of times at like 21 feet below grade.
Is that a layer of rock under the subsurface, or what
No,
is
just
that?
really good strata. Sometimes it's bedrock, absolutely. But then all of a sudden, we'll be going down to 21, 25, 28 feet, so forth and so on. And then out of the clear blue sky, we'll have piers that go down 80 feet, 110 feet.
And they're still going.
150, yeah, until we get to low-bearing strata. So when you say Swiss cheese, that's exactly, why that description is utilized a lot of times. Is you'll have some very firm soil strata layers down there, even bedrock at times, but then out of nowhere we have an area where it just kind of falls off.
Yeah, we have a very interesting structure underneath our geotechnical soil here in the state of Florida. Again, getting back to that, if someone has some cracking or anything like that, what are some of the different methods you use? You use the piers or the pylons underneath. Any other techniques you guys are using to stabilize?
Yeah, right now I have a structure that I'm working on. I put it together a project for out on Sanibel Island, and the homeowner has the home built on a lot of concrete columns, and it's kind of like a parking garage kind of a structure. You have your columns, and you have your still reinforced concrete beams, and due to chloride contamination, we are taking kind of a different approach. The structure is not settling, but in this case, it's more of a structural issue. So we're utilizing that same technology I made reference to earlier that the Army Corps of Engineers created, and we're going to treat those concrete columns and beams, and it will super strengthen the concrete, shut down the corrosion. But then we're going to install carbon fiber, which is a very strong material, per its unit size even stronger than steel. And we're going to wrap those columns in those beams, and that's going to provide a tremendous increase in factor of safety for the homeowner in that case. Now, if those columns were sinking, we could attach column brackets to that, still drive down the piles down to low-bearing strata, and prevent further settlement in that case. So I just kind of threw that one out there because there's so many different variations of what we do, and it's always just case specific based on the structure that we're working on, and the various different solutions that'll provide safety and still be cost effective to prevent complete failure of the structure.
And you guys, I imagine you're doing stuff in commercial buildings, right? With some of these condos having to get the
milestone inspections.
All the stuff from Senate Bill 4D, where the structural integrity is compromised in some way or another.
Yeah, I was actually contacted by Wayne Pathman. He's the former senior chair of the State of Florida Resiliency Commission, and he was involved. They're down in Miami, Pathman Law is, but Wayne Pathman is also a resiliency expert for infrastructure, and so when he was doing his look into the whole Miami Surfside condo collapse, he found out about the technologies that I'm working with, including our patented technology, and he determined that these technologies qualify commercial property owners for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Funding, CPACE funding. And what that does...
That's good. They need that.
They really do. So there's so many different ways, whether it's a parking garage, an elevator shaft on our commercial structure. These poor property owners and all these condo associations have a lot that they're dealing with right now due to these milestone inspections. So there's a lot of different ways that we can help them, both with advanced solutions, but also with funding capabilities as well.
What was the ultimate, what did they say about the Surfside collapse that basically caused that to crumble? What was it? I know they said it was deferred maintenance. That's how Senate Bill 4D came into place. But what was the big factors that triggered that?
I think there's still some disagreement amongst various different forensic engineers. I've talked to a few of them that were involved in that. It's my opinion. I'm not speaking for any engineers.
It was a curious question, yeah.
I think there was... pretty good evidence that for a period of time there was chloride contamination in the various different load-bearing members, whether it was the columns and the beams. And I think there was clear indications that had been widely reviewed, even in the media, that there was spalling taking place. Spalling is just internal steel reinforcement inside the structural concrete members that begins to cause the concrete to fail and break apart. And I think what you had is just a good old-fashioned cause and effect reaction. I think one of the members under the swimming pool failed, leading down to the parking garage area, and you had one failure that immediately led to a second, and so forth and so on. And it was horribly, absolutely horrible catastrophe.
Yeah. You said the chlorine. Say it again.
Chloride contamination.
So what is that? Explain that.
Sure. Here in Florida, especially because of all the heat and humidity, and our air is full of chlorides, from the salt water. Just the relationship of air, the bodies of water that we're surrounded by, so forth and so on. So all of our concrete, all of our steel reinforced concrete is constantly in contact with moisture that has chlorides in it. And these chlorides are very acidic, and they cause oxidation of the surface of steel. And when you have oxidization of the surface of steel, it creates what's referred to as the anodic ring effect. And just like a car battery that has a positive side and a negative side, with steel, that is a mechanism through electrolytes to cause the anodic side to give up electron molecules to the cathodic side. And that is where you start to see that cracking and breaking effect of concrete because there's expansion inside the concrete from the anodic ring effect.
Well, it's been a fascinating show. I've really enjoyed talking to you. My guest for this hour is Mr. Ken Bronlick, and he is with Groundworks. They do all type of stabilization, seawall reinforcement, and then some, right?
Absolutely.
Everything as it relates to firming up your structure integrity and making it strong.
Absolutely.
Well said, yes.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, and our off-air number, if you'd like to connect with Ken, is 813-377-2775. You can call or text that off-air number anytime. We're happy to get you connected. 813-377-2775. Remember, love where you live, or we're going to fix it. Welcome home.